Welcome to the Thrive Today podcast. I'm Natalie Born, the media host for Thrive Today and the founder of Innovation Meets Leadership. We are a platform for women who lead and believe, and I'm so excited to have one of our favorite guests back, Shaunti Feldhahn. She has been all over the world selling books. She's a researcher. She is so amazing, and we are actually going to dive into one of her articles that she wrote on Thrive Today around kindness. So I'm so excited to have you. I know that you've been out there getting the word out about your new book project, which we'll talk about at the end, but welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Natalie.
Well, I want to start with something that you've written about. You have a book on the power of kindness. And this is honestly, I'm going to be honest, I'm just thinking about it. It's not a word, especially in business, we hear talked about a lot. Like you don't hear that word being thrown around a lot, but it's such an impactful and important word. So I'd love to just kind of kick off and talk a little bit about that book project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the chance to, because I agree. This is one of these topics that once we started the research on this, and I should probably explain, I'm a social researcher, so I can't help myself. I do these big research studies, and this one blew me away.
Wow.
Because here's the thing. Everybody listening to this, let's start here. Everybody listening to this values kindness, right? Like I'm quite sure that there's not a person in the audience who thinks that it's unimportant. Here's the issue that really gets in the way. We don't realize that we think we are kind.
Wow.
And we don't realize that every day there are ways, multiple times a day, that we are actively unkind in our personal life, in our leadership, in our workplace, and we don't even see it. We are totally blind. And so that is really why this is such an important leadership tool and an important leadership topic. It's because we actually have to bridge this gap between what we think we're already doing and actually, oh, we do need to be doing this a lot better.
Wow. Well, I love that what you're going to help us do today is dig into what is probably a major blind spot for us as leaders. And the fact that, a lot of times when I'll do a 360 review with a leader and we'll sit down and look at the feedback, they're shocked. And it just shows us how often there's a cognitive dissonance between how we think we show up and how we actually show up.
Yeah, exactly. It is kind of amusing when we actually sat down and did the research on this, and there was a study group of more than 1,000 people who were practicing what eventually became what we called the 30-day kindness challenge, which is this kind of intervention. It's like, okay, let me do this and see the impact that it makes. And I will tell you that for me, I thought, oh, I thought the same thing. Like, I'm kind, like I'm positive. I'm one of these people that values the people that work with me and for me. This is something that I attend to, and I had no earthly idea just how often I was doing everything wrong that all the leadership books say not to do. Like it is truly, it does come down to kindness. And here's really the issue, that one of the things that we found in the research that was fascinating, which is that really the best and the most important mechanism to care for people well is to learn how to be kind, because it turns out that our for us as leaders, that often there is a not just a blind spot, but really truly a kind of cluelessness, active cluelessness that we don't realize is there. So anyway, that's the starting point that I think all of us need to grapple with.
Okay, so I'm going to call myself out here a little bit. My friend and I try to do this kindness challenge with our husbands. We were like, "Hey, for 30 days, we're not gonna," and you're right, in the first 2 days, it
Yes.
rose to the surface that, and I remember her giving me, like, the journal, and we're gonna do this, and I just remember how you don't realize how negative you are. You don't realize how many times
Yeah.
instead of taking the time to bless somebody, you actually curse them. You don't realize how, it almost feels strange now to realize now I'm taking account of what's actually coming out of my mouth, and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right.
Well, that's honestly that was the big aha for me. I'll be very candid, and it is the big aha for most of us, is that because we all think that we do this already, when you do something like the 30-day kindness challenge where you actually have to track what you're doing, one of the things, for example, I'll just give you an example. One of the things that we saw pretty starkly is that one of the elements of the 30-day kindness challenge is you have to say words of praise every day. And just one, like even just one, like just track that you have done that one thing and you've said something affirming. Before the 30-day kindness challenge, before the start, you have to take a pre-survey, if you were part of our research group. And most people guessed that they said something affirming, whether it was to a colleague or to a spouse or to a child, about 2 to 3 times a day. Like that was the number that everybody thought. And then they had to actually track how often they did it. Like how often do those words actually come out of your mouth? And people realized, "Oh my word, it's actually 2 to 3 times a week."
Oh, wow.
And that was a very, very common finding, and that was the average for most people going through this. And so here is one of the issues. We think kind thoughts.
Mhm.
We value treating people well, and we don't realize that it doesn't make it out of our mouth.
Yeah.
It stays stuck in our head, and so we need a mechanism to develop a new habit.
Wow. Yeah, I would encourage everyone who's listening to consider doing this challenge because it helps you to realize and take inventory and account of what you're actually saying, not what you think you say. So often to your point, we think that we're complimenting someone, but it's just a thought going through our mind and it never comes out of our mouth. And unfortunately, what that means is that we may hold someone in really high esteem, but they never know it. And they may even be wondering, what does this person think about me? Because we don't, we may think it or feel it in our heart, but if we don't say it, then
Right.
it never creates that impact that you're talking about.
Do you mind if I explain what the 30-day kindness challenge actually is?
Let's do it.
'Cause I'm sure people are like, "What is this thing?" So let me just explain. This came out of this research study in order to figure out what were the most impactful things that you could do if you wanted to improve a relationship.
Mm.
And so that was it could be any relationship. It could be your colleague at work that's really difficult, but you have to work with them really closely. It could be your spouse. It could be for me, for example, the first time I did this for my daughter who was 16 years old at the time because, great kid, but 16. And
Teenagers.
like, yes. And my head wanted to explode some of the time. And so what we tell everybody is to pick a person to do this for.
Mm.
And it has to be somebody that you see fairly regularly. You can do the 30-day kindness challenge later for anybody, but the first time that you do it, it has to be someone you want a better relationship with, and it has to be someone that you interact with reasonably regularly. So like if it's your sister who you have a difficult relationship with, but she lives in a different city, you only talk to her once or twice a month, like that's not going to work. So here's what you do. You pick that person and then you're going to do the same 3 things every day for 30 days. And so here are the 3 things. First, you're going to say nothing negative about that person, nothing unkind, either to them or about them to somebody else. And that last piece of about them to somebody else, that is often where we sabotage ourselves and our relationships without realizing it. Because let's just say I do this for my husband, for example. I can be polite to him, but if I go to my girlfriends after he's done something that frustrated me and I go, ugh, like, you're not going to believe what he did yesterday, I don't realize it, but I'm sabotaging how I feel about him.
Yeah.
And it works this way at work. It works this way in every kind of area of our life. So
Mhm.
that's the first thing. Nothing negative, either to them or about them. The second thing that we do every day for 30 days is we find a small, we say some small, often words of affirmation. We find something that we can praise and we sincerely tell that person and we tell somebody else about that person. So, like, again, with my husband, I can't be annoyed that he didn't do something he said he would do, but I'm looking for something to praise and I notice, oh my goodness, like, he did this thing with the kids. I couldn't hear myself think. He took the kids so I could be on my Zoom meeting. He went outside and played with them in the yard. I say, "Thank you so much for doing that." Like, I could not hear myself think, "That was so great of you." And then I tell a girlfriend, "You know what he did yesterday? He took the kids out, and, like, it saved my life." And as you do those things, for those of us who are people of faith, we know what that is. That's putting, like, Philippians 4:8
Mhm.
into action. That is, "Hey, if you have trouble, think on whatever is lovely.
Yeah.
Think on whatever is excellent. Think of whatever is worthy of praise. Focus on those things." And so it's putting that into practice. And then the third thing that you do every day for 30 days is just a small, like, action of kindness or generosity. This could be anything. So, like, your colleague at work, you think of maybe you're doing this for a difficult colleague and you think of an action of generosity or kindness as being an act of service.
Mm.
So, you think of maybe, "Oh, I'll bring them coffee after lunch," for no reason, just to, be kind. It could be an act of service, but it could be is so much more than that. Like, consider an action of generosity, like, for example, maybe they're floundering in a meeting
Mhm.
and they're trying to explain something and they're not doing a very good job and you've been at odds with them. It's an immense action of generosity to speak up and say, what Bill is saying is actually really important because this thing happened yesterday and I saw how it worked. And so I really think Bill's point here is essential and, like, dialing into it, and you're supporting him in this meeting. That's an action of generosity that maybe before you would have just kinda sat back and let him flounder a little bit.
Well, I
You do.
guarantee you Bill's
Yeah.
head is going to spin around and look at you in shock that you
You're like,
actually
"What?"
supported him in this meeting when you guys have been at odds. Like, let's be honest, I've been in the, corporate America long enough to know that kind of thing doesn't happen. And so
Yeah.
when you do that and you're at odds with that person, it opens up their heart. It opens up their mind to reconcile with you. That
I
is the
It is
biggest red carpet you could ever roll
huge.
out in corporate America.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting because you do those 3 things every day for 30 days. We actually found 89% of relationships improved, which is an enormous number in
Matt.
social science. But here's the thing, it makes to your point, it makes perfect sense because it just doesn't happen all that often, and so there's an outsized impact, but the biggest reason for that huge impact isn't what you think it is. It's not just that you're improving the temperature of the relationship with Bill, like, that you are, right? Absolutely. But the biggest thing that's happening as you do this, especially the first few days, the biggest thing that you realize that you're doing is you're totally changing you.
Wow.
And, like, your mindset, like, you realize, "Oh my word, I had no idea how often I was saying these little kind of eye rolly kind of comments." Like,
Mhm.
those things that you're not allowed to do for 30 days, you're gonna start seeing them everywhere. And you realize how often you were undermining that relationship with Bill, who you have to work with every single day, and you had no clue how often you were doing something that was putting obstacles in your way.
Wow.
So that's the starting point. That's what the 30-day kindness challenge is.
Well, what I love about this is we are now focused on the humanity and the beauty of the
Yeah.
person and the relationship, not on all of the negativity and the doubt and the, anxiety and anxiousness that thinking
Yep.
on something that someone has done that wronged you or hurt you that one time now becomes, even though maybe it happened 3 months ago, 3 weeks ago, but now we extrapolate it over every interaction, which creates that negative state of mind. And it's almost impossible to get over that if we can't get our brain thinking better
Yeah.
thoughts.
Well, and let me give you an example of something that I heard, not that long ago. I was speaking at a convention in, the Midwest, and a woman comes up to me after my talk because I was talking about the 30-day kindness challenge in business and leadership, and she said, "I have to give you an example." I'm like, "Okay." And she said her company, the way that they are structured is that there were 2 kind of parallel divisions and she led one and another woman led another, and they had to work together a lot. The 2 of them leading these parallel divisions because her analysts were working with the other lady's salespeople, basically. And she said it was one of the most difficult relationships I've ever had in my life. Like, it almost got to the point where it was a feud
Wow.
between the groups. Sort of like your analysts aren't doing their job. Well, your salespeople aren't effective. Like, it was that kind of thing. And almost to the point where they weren't any longer working towards the same goals. And she started thinking about resigning because it was impacting her ability to get done what she needed to get done and serve a bunch of other departments that she had to serve. She was listening to a radio program that it just happened that I was on a radio program talking briefly about the 30-day kindness challenge. And she said, "Okay, you know what? I'm going to try this. Like, I have to because either that or I've got to find another job." And she didn't want to. She didn't really want to do this, but she didn't wanna leave the company either. And when she wasn't working with this particular lady, she said it was great, like, it was a great company. So, she said that was a year and a half ago. I said, "Really? What happened?" We're standing in the convention center talking about this, and she goes, "See that lady over there? She's now my best work friend."
Oh,
And I'm
that's
like,
really cool.
"What?" I'm like, "Tell me what happened." And she said, "I realized that as soon as I started doing this, it was like God hit me over the head, and
Mhm.
I realized how often I was venting about her
Yeah.
to the people in my downline,
Wow.
like, well, we'd be able to get this done except for Bonnie over here,
Yeah.
and she said, I had no idea how often I was sabotaging how I felt about her and how much I was not seeing some of the good things. And so she
Wow.
said that one action of kind of having to change my mind really changed my mind. And she said, it's not like, that we don't have issues anymore. We do have very different personalities, and sometimes they make decisions I don't agree with, but we're on the same page now. And she's my best friend at work. Like, we go out to lunch and stuff, and we just kind of laugh about the things that, like, well, there you go again, like, about those things instead of letting it derail the relationship and the business.
Wow. This is so impactful. And again, when I go back to what you said about 89% of relationships are changed, it reminds me
Yeah.
of 2 Corinthians 10:5, where it talks about how we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets
Oh, I
itself
love
up
that.
against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought into obedience of Christ. And so I feel like when we talk about that scripture, this is exactly what we're doing. We're taking thoughts
Yeah.
captive that are negative. And then when we ingest them and chew on them, they grow. And the small thing that someone did 3 weeks ago is now huge. And we're telling everyone about it. And we're destroying the potential of that relationship before it's really even started. And so I love what you're sharing with us, because it helps us to understand how a thought worm, right? This really small thing that
Yes.
happened can just grow into this giant. And now we're at odds. We're in complete and utter dysfunction with this other person. Call it a spouse or a child or a best friend or a coworker named Bob, right? So
Yeah.
it just begins to grow. And I would just add to this. I had a very similar situation with someone, 2 ladies I worked with, and it was very frustrating, and I didn't feel like one of them was competent in their role, and they kept proposing things
Mm.
that were derailing the whole organization, and I had to do something very similar to this with those 2 relationships. And one of those ladies years later has come back and asked to be my client, and
Wow.
it was literally sitting down and going through this and saying, "Okay, I have a choice today. I can either think about what they did yesterday and mull over that for the next hour, or I can take that thought captive and choose to think better about them today." And it is hard to do. This is not easy stuff,
No.
but it's so worthwhile, and you see that from the statistics that you shared with us.
Yes. Well, and some people listening to this are like, "But what if they are incompetent? And
Yeah.
what if," like, and so here's one of the kind of nuances that's really, really crucial to say out loud. And we need to make sure that we say this, which is that we cannot confuse being kind with being nice.
Mm,
Okay? So the way that it works often is that what we think is being kind is actually just niceness. Like, it's trying to be pleasant. It's trying to keep us sort of surface level of, kind of happy, pleasant, oh, I'll just look at the bright side on them, the positive thinking. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like we were talking about, it can actually be pretty valuable. But true kindness cares about the best interest of the other person.
mm,
And true kindness sometimes has to say hard things just in a kind way,
yeah.
and do hard things sometimes in a kind way. And so, just this is just an example. When I was working on this, one of my research consultants was telling me a story about how he had a group of folks working for him, and one of them was a bit of a difficult personality, and also just kept being slow. Like, as a consultant, you can't be slow. Like, he's like, "I don't wanna pay you for 30 hours when it should have been done in 18,"
Yeah.
right? Like, and just seemed unable to speed it up. And so he said, "The kindest thing that I could do for
Mm,
that person is to let them go."
yeah.
Because they are miserable, they're making everybody else miserable, they're making me miserable, and the kindest thing that I can do is to sit down and say, "This is not a good fit for you." And he said that the fascinating thing is, and I actually I know that he's telling the truth because I know some of the people he's talking about. He said, "The fascinating thing is," he said, "I've had to do that multiple times." And he said, "Almost everybody that I've ever fired, almost everybody, has come back later and asked if they could use me as a reference, because I was so good at sharing with them what they're good at."
Yeah.
Because he said, "I would sit down and say, 'Look, you are amazing at this, 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 and this, but not being able to be a fast writer, it makes consulting not a great fit for you.
Mhm.
But you're really good at this, 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 and this. So I'm going to make a call to my buddy over here. And, anytime you want a reference." And he said, they all come back and ask for a reference from someone who fired them, because it's true kindness.
Yeah.
It's truly caring about the best interest of the other person.
Yeah.
It is not the same thing as niceness, where you're trying to kind of not let the boat be rocked and
Mhm.
keep everything pleasant. It's like, absolutely not. That is not true kindness.
Wow, that's such an important distinction between niceness and kindness. I love that you added that in.
Yeah.
Would you, in our last segment, just share, what you've been up to more recently? What kind of
Yeah,
projects you're working on?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The most recent project, I'm doing several projects on mental health, and
So
I
needed
just
right
wrote.
now.
You what?
It's so needed right now.
Oh, it is so needed.
Yeah.
Well, and in particular, this book is called When Hurting People Come to Church.
Wow.
And it's a book for church leaders and pastors and counselors and church volunteers and people who care about mental health, because it's essentially helping the church. It's a vision and a how to help the church become a key solution to the mental health crisis.
That's amazing. So needed. So needed.
Hugely needed. And basically the short version is that right now, most pastors, most church leaders, most clinicians think that the only option is to refer people out
Mm.
to mental health professionals, which certainly is absolutely important. Like my co-author on the book is a clinical psychologist
Mhm.
who's been training the people that we refer people to. However, there just isn't enough supply
Yeah.
of pastors and counselors today, which is why there are these long wait lists, and difficulties paying for it and like
Yeah.
all the things. And so the church has a huge opportunity to step in and say, look, not everything requires a mental health professional. And even the things that do, you know what that person needs just as much as they need the clinical, like, here's some skills building. They need a friend.
Yeah.
They need somebody to walk alongside. So you have postpartum depression, you can't get out of bed. Absolutely, you probably need clinical help. But you know what? There is a woman in our church who went through this 10 years ago,
Mm.
and she loves walking alongside people going through it. Let's connect you.
Yeah.
That kind of vision would really change the church today. And it's a type of kindness. It's a type of what we've been talking about.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for creating this resource. I mean, I immediately right now I'm thinking about 5 pastors that when we get off the phone, I'm just gonna send your book their way
Thank
because
you.
I think it's so necessary and it's such a big um, thing that we're facing right now in the church,
Yeah.
which is what do you do with all these people that need real help?
And what we're trying to do is to equip the people who have a vision for that, because you can't go to your pastor and say, "Hey, we should do this."
Yeah,
Like, every pastor I know is the busiest person that
that's
I
right.
know, right? And so what I'm hoping is people listening to this, that they get a vision and that they get a friend and they go to the pastor and say, "Hey, we'd like to start something like this in our church. We'll be the ones to try to get this up and running and see how it goes and create a system."
Yeah, that's powerful. Well, Shaunti, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people find and follow you and learn more about some of your resources?
So you can always find anything on my website, which is shaunti.com, which is shaunti.com, or on social media, Shaunti Feldhahn.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. You're an absolute joy to have with us again.
Thanks so much.
Well, everyone, this has been such an incredible episode where we're talking about kindness. I want to encourage you. I want you to find a friend and do this 30-day challenge. I think it will change the trajectory of your relationships. And so that's your action step today. Grab somebody, do the 30-day challenge, dig into some of these resources. And ladies, as you go about this week, don't forget to thrive. We'll see you next time.